Did your little drive into the desert turn into a bloody nightmare? Are you caught in between a cartel war that you know nothing about? If you find yourself stranded in the middle of the desert with no idea on how you're gonna keep going, then you better call Saul. Bagman is the pinnacle episode of Better Call Saul. It contains the moment that we have been waiting for. It contains the moment when Jimmy McGill becomes Saul Goodman. We've seen Jimmy temporarily become Saul with a simple turn of his head in Namaste and JMM. He does this again in Bagman. It's after Jimmy gets out of running Lalo's errand. Then Saul says that he'll do it for $100,000. But this is going to be the last time that we see this temporary takeover by Saul. Because when Jimmy's in the desert, he calls Saul. Both Kim and Lalo bare their feet in this episode. Bare feet represent a glorified perception of freedom from life's realities. And that is the perfect description of Jimmy's attitude towards transporting $7 million in cash through the desert. Kim, who always says okay to Jimmy's decisions, even when she disagrees with them, tries to get Jimmy to see the danger that he is getting himself into, telling him, I don't like this, I don't want you to do it. But Jimmy refuses to see the reality of the situation. He even claims that his Azuzu esteem will be his ultimate protection. The reason Jimmy can't see the danger he has gotten himself into is because he believes that Saul protects him from this danger. Jimmy feels protected by Saul. In Magic Man, we see that Jimmy's whole reason for becoming Saul is protection. He tells Kim that Saul protects him from being Chuck McGill's loser brother. That he can't be Chuck McGill's loser brother anymore, and that's why he needs to be Saul. But by the time we get to JMM, Jimmy starts to believe that Saul can protect him not only from being Chuck McGill's loser brother, but from being in the world. This is why he tells Howard that he is a god in human clothing. We see this idea of Saul being a suit of armor that protects Jimmy from being in the world in this shot, where there is distance between Jimmy and Saul's reflection. It's as if Jimmy isn't really there. It's as if Jimmy is watching Saul run this errand from a distant place, a distant, safe place. However, Jimmy is quickly confronted with the reality that he is front and center in a life and death situation. He is exposed to extreme violence, death, and disregard for life. Saul's suit, Jimmy's car, and the second best lawyer cup that represents his relationship to Kim all end up as casualties of the gunfire. A little while later, Jimmy removes his ring, the one that was Marco's, which he rubs when he needs some confidence. We saw him last do this right before his lunch with Howard. At this point, the desert has stripped Jimmy of the delusions that Saul can protect him from being in the world and the possessions that defined his identity. But it takes Mike to get Jimmy to see the whole truth. When Mike points out that Jimmy has put Kim in the game and therefore in danger, Jimmy realizes Saul has not protected him from anything, including being Chuck McGill's loser brother. In season 3, episode 10, Chuck tells Jimmy, you hurt people, you should embrace it. Having put Kim in a dangerous position, Jimmy realizes he never stopped being Chuck McGill's loser brother, who hurts people, even the ones he loves. You can see the terror on Jimmy's face in this moment when Mike makes him confront the fact that he still hurts people. Saul has not protected him from being Chuck McGill's loser brother. This moment in the desert destroys all of Jimmy's fantasies about what Saul could be for him. He realizes that Saul has really been nothing. After a cactus shows Jimmy that business shoes are just like bare feet in the desert, Jimmy reaches his limit. He becomes his pain and misery, and that is all he is. He has nothing left at this point and is certain he will die in that dirt one way or another. But then Jimmy asks Mike how he keeps going. And this question that Jimmy asks creates a new kind of distance between Jimmy and his self. The distance that Jimmy felt earlier from Saul, the distance that he saw in his reflection between himself and Saul, was created on the surface by changing his appearance and his name. But in this moment, when Jimmy questions his state of being compared to Mike's, when Jimmy says, "How do you keep going when I am completely out of everything and cannot even sit up at this point?" Jimmy creates a distance inside himself from himself. He puts himself in a state of self-reflection, and it puts his pain and misery at a distance. At this point, Jimmy no longer is his pain and misery. He has put distance between him and himself, and it's like he's looking at somebody else that is in pain and misery. Mike's answer to Jimmy's question is, "I know why I'm here." This is the only part of Mike's question that matters to Jimmy. Mike goes on to give the rest of his answer about why he's there and how it has to do with serving others. But that part of Mike's answer is for us, the audience. None of that matters to Jimmy. The only part of Mike's answer that matters to Jimmy is, "I know why I'm here." The rest of Mike's answer is about serving others. And a defining difference between Mike and Jimmy is that Mike serves others and Jimmy serves himself. This is why that second part of the answer didn't matter to Jimmy. He can't even relate to it. Mike serves Jimmy as a guide in the desert. He does this because he serves Gus in order to serve Stacy and Kaylee. Mike serves others. Again, in this episode, even though Mike doesn't have enough water to share, he still serves Jimmy some of his water. We get a whole scene where we see Mike serving Jimmy his water. Jimmy, on the other hand, serves himself with Mike's water. And again, they go out of their way to show this to us. Jimmy serves himself with Mike's water and then asks for more. Also, in Wexler versus Goodman, in a moment of honesty, we see Kim actually call Jimmy out on the point that he only serves himself. Mike serves others, and Jimmy serves himself. Yes, Jimmy wants to get home to Kim, but he didn't need Mike to remind him of that. He's been trying to call Kim throughout this entire trek. Plus, Mike does not say he knows why he wants to make it out of the desert. Mike says he knows why he is there. Jimmy's reason for being there cannot be Kim. Kim didn't want him to go, and by him going, he put Kim in danger. Kim cannot be Jimmy's reason for being in the desert. Kim is actually part of the weight in the form of guilt and shame that has beaten Jimmy down to the state that he is in right now. Jimmy put Kim in danger, and the truth is he can't protect Kim from the cartel. He can't even protect himself from the cartel. That's what Mike has been doing this entire episode. Jimmy's ultimate problem is he doesn't know why he's there. He has no reason to be in the desert right now. He's just a lawyer who tried to get out of this errand because he wants things to work with the woman he loves and has recently married. Jimmy has no reason to be in the desert, but he needs one if he wants to keep going. The desert stripped Jimmy of identity and beat him down to nothing but pain and misery. Jimmy then questioned his state of being, and this put distance between Jimmy and his pain and misery. Jimmy is in a very rare state of being right now. He sees his self in its nothingness. Jimmy was nothing but pain and misery, and then he removed himself from that pain and misery, and now he is nothingness. He sees in this nothingness of his self that he is no more Jimmy than he is Saul. He sees that his self is no more Jimmy than it is Saul. That his self is actually nothing until it is something. And then his self is whatever it has become. His self is nothing until it actually becomes something. And then his self is whatever it has become. Jimmy realizes there is no predefined self inside him. He is not obligated to be any particular person at all. That he truly can be whoever he wants to be. Jimmy is just a lawyer who has no reason for being in the desert. But Saul is whoever you need him to be. And Saul knows why he's in the desert. He's there to get Lalo's money so he can get his $100,000. We say that Saul is whoever you need him to be because of what Jimmy told Howard in the episode Namaste during lunch. Jimmy tells Howard, if you're being sold up the river, Saul's a raft. If you're being stepped on, Saul's a pointy stick. Saul is a friend to the friendless. If you go through the whole list that Jimmy goes through in describing Saul to Howard, Jimmy's really only saying one thing to Howard. Saul is whoever you need him to be. If Jimmy wants to survive, he needs to become Saul. He needs to become Saul so he can see the world as Saul. When Jimmy first entered the desert, he was presenting Saul to the world. He wanted the world to see Saul. And we talked about the distance that he created and how it was all based on surface changes. Jimmy changed his appearance so that when the world looked at him, it would see Saul. But what Jimmy has to do now is become Saul on the inside. So instead of the world looking at him and seeing Saul, Jimmy needs to see the world as Saul. It's the big shift that occurs with Jimmy in the desert. If Jimmy wants to survive, he needs to become Saul so he can see the world as Saul, a world where money matters most, a world where money is valued more than anything, where money matters more than love, life, or justice, where money matters more than everything that Jimmy has lost in that desert, including a type of, I don't know if you call it innocence or respect for humanity, but whatever effect the traumatic scene that started this all off had on Jimmy. Once Jimmy does this, once Jimmy can make money matter above everything else, it becomes clear as to why he is in the desert. Saul didn't care about anything except he can make $100,000 if he makes this trip in the desert and gets Lalo's money for him. That's what motivated Saul. And that's what Jimmy needs right now. Jimmy needs to find motivation. He couldn't find it as Jimmy McGill. But Saul Goodman values money above everything else. And so all the things that are weighing Jimmy down right now don't matter to Saul. The only thing that matters to Saul is getting that money out of the desert so he can get his $100,000. Jimmy entered the desert acting like Saul, but in the end, it's Saul that stands up. And he's acting like Jimmy. We know he's acting because his plan is to act like bait. We know he's acting like Jimmy because he's walking down the middle of the road that he's being hunted on, like an idiot. He even calls himself an idiot while he's doing this. This is exactly what Jimmy wanted to do when Mike and him first started walking. Jimmy says, why can't we walk down the main road? And Mike says, because we're being hunted on this road. We got to get on a side road. Saul stands up at that moment acting like Jimmy. In the end, we see Saul strap the bags of money around his neck, like a bagman would, to be sure no one can take the bags from him. Jimmy did everything he could throughout this episode to avoid carrying those bags. He tried dragging them. He tried to get Mike to carry them. He even wanted to bury him in the desert and just leave him there because Jimmy's just a lawyer. But Saul sees the world differently. Saul isn't just a lawyer. Saul is whoever you need him to be. So in the end, when Saul stands up, he's not a lawyer. He's a bagman. It is not Jimmy that walks out of the desert. It's Saul. It seems like Jimmy because it's Saul acting like Jimmy. This was the pinnacle episode of this series. The moment we've been waiting for Jimmy McGill to turn into Saul Goodman. It happened in that desert when Mike told Jimmy, you need to know why you're here. And he told Jimmy that because Jimmy needed motivation. And motivation comes from knowing what you value. Jimmy decided at that moment that he was going to value money above everything else because that's the only way he was going to make it out of that desert. And so that's what Jimmy did. And Jimmy is now Saul. Please go ahead and subscribe if you want to be alerted of all the Better Call Saul season 5 videos that I upload in the upcoming weeks. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks so much for watching and have a great day.